Entrepreneurship is a mindset. And I think South Africans, we've got the most incredible entrepreneurs in South Africa, but I think we need to sort of cultivate a culture of where failure isn't failure, where failure is learnings, where we still got this culture where a failure is a failure.
So
it's not.
true.
Absolutely isn't. I met over 70 investors.
Crazy.
I was looking for 50 million, right?
Okay.
So I related to going on 70 dates. And every single one you think's the one, right? And then they just ghost you. Eventually I find a high net worth individual out of Cape Town. I think we concluded a deal 3 weeks later. Then we could really start running.
Collett is the pioneering founder and CEO of Melon Mobile, South Africa's first fully digital customer-first mobile network. With a tech background to launching MTN's award-winning Supersonic unit, he built Melon from 0 to 50 employees with over 100,000 users and growing. Calvin's relentless focus on simplicity, innovation, and trust earned Melon Mobile the most customer-centric MVNO title, reshaping how telecoms work in South Africa.
Thank you so much for making time. I truly appreciate it. I know how busy you are, and we've been trying to find a date. So thank you to your team and yourself for making time. I truly appreciate it. Where I'd love to start, Calvin, if we are in, you're at some dinner party with your wife and there's like influential people around and someone has a conversation with you and they're like, what do you do for a living? What's that sort of elevator pitch answer that you give?
That's quite interesting. When I started, I started out saying, we're South Africa's first digital telco, and we this and that, and everyone's eyes glaze over, going like, what does that actually mean? So I've simplified it now, and I think this is the angle that we are focusing on now. Is we're South Africa's fifth mobile network, and that's really what our aim ultimately is that. The MTNs, Vodafone's, Telkom, and Cell C's, they've done a fantastic job for the last 30 years. But I think in the last 10 specifically, I think they've lost touch with the customer, and specifically from a customer service offering proposition perspective. And we want to be that alternative, right? I think we've come out and said, we're going to disrupt the status quo. We're going to come out and be, customer centric, simplicity, all of those kind of things at the core. And for that to happen, we have to position ourselves as not an MVNO, because I think MVNOs have a stigma attached to them. I think there've been a lot of failures in the MVNO industry. They've kind of copy and pasted what the MNOs or mobile network operators have done. I think they've done it badly. So we try to come out and do something differently. So our position is to say we're South Africa's fifth mobile network. When you're tired of the red guys or the yellow guys or the blue guys or the orange guys, there's an alternative, which is the green guys. So in short, the elevator pitch is we're South Africa's fifth mobile network, and we're building it to be sort of customer centric. So kind of change that pitch to be a lot simpler and more understandable than a very tech based answer.
I love that. And just so people understand, what's the difference between those two?
MNO is a mobile network operator.
Yes.
MVNO is a mobile virtual network operator.
Yes. Primary
difference there is infrastructure. So we don't own any towers. We roam off the back of MTN currently. And we chose MTN specifically. Look, I was an executive at MTN, so it made sense that, I knew the guys was easy to get a deal there. But more importantly, they are South Africa's best mobile network.
Yes.
If you take the Ookla, the My Broadband test, etc., they are South Africa's number one network. So it makes sense.
Got you.
We've got exactly the same quality of services as MTN, so there's no degradation. It's not like we're running a substandard or subpar set of metrics. It's exactly the same. So from an MVNO perspective, we're actually just running off the back of MTN, and we're just more customer-centric and customer-facing. So it's you kind of want to call us the green guys on the back of the yellow guys.
Yeah.
I love that. We're just easier to deal with.
Amazing.
I think that's the long and the short.
Can't wait to get into all of that. So before we jump into that world, I just want a quick understanding of your story. So if I were watching a Netflix documentary now on your life, and that Netflix logo comes on, How would you imagine that documentary or your autobiography one day to start? Like, what would be that opening chapter? And I would imagine it would paint some sort of early context on you. How would you imagine your story beginning?
Look, I think in terms of being, highly disruptive tech industry, highly unlikely. I mean, I'm a farmer's son, grew up in Zimbabwe, very different childhood. I mean, I'll say a privileged childhood in terms of the fact that, grew up on a farm, didn't really know anything about the city or technology or any of those things. I mean, no telephones, no TVs, no nothing. So kind of a very simple upbringing. I say privileged because I think if I could give my kids some of that today, it'd be amazing. It's just a different world we live in. So it doesn't work like that. But a very simple upbringing. I went to Pretoria Boys High. And that was an interesting thing. I mean, I came literally from the farm, off the farm, never seen the bright lights, straight into Pretoria. And that was really interesting. And I was a boarder, and I absolutely loved the school. And it was a baptism by fire, I will say, because it was a completely different world. There was just so many things that I wasn't used to, but it was much required. Left school, didn't know what I wanted to do. While I was at school, I really enjoyed the computer science. I did a bit of woodwork. I was just dabbling in various other things. And I decided, listen, when I left, I was like, look, I'm going to do some computer courses. Didn't really know what I wanted to do, but, tech seemed like the place it was going to go. And my family was still farming up north. But I was like, look, I'm not really that keen. I then did some computer courses, ended up getting... So what happened was, if you were the top 3 in your class, you were automatically guaranteed a job. I sort of was like, let me try and get that because I'd love to get a job. I managed to get top 3 and got a job doing Y2K project. And that's kind of how I started. So that was my journey. And from there, I went into Accenture. I did some consulting for Accenture for a while. And then the consulting space just wasn't for me. I just realized, like, look, I love the tech, the consulting, but I didn't feel like we were changing anything. It was kind of, a lot of talk, but I could never go through and actually make that, turn the PowerPoint presentations into reality and actually make a real difference. It was always someone else had to make the difference.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, they couldn't execute it or whatever else. So I got pretty frustrated. Went back to the farm, spent 3 years there and realized, look, I can't do this.
How old were you then?
I was 24. And spent 3 years there and just realized, look, I've got to do something else. I went back to Pretoria, or actually to Johannesburg. And then I started a company called iConnect. And that was a B2C and B2B ISP. Did that for 10 years and grew that thing really nicely. I mean, it's still going today. I absolutely loved that business. But it got to a point where myself and the existing shareholders had just a different shared vision, right? Yes. I wanted to grow this thing. I had a vision that at the time, we could be 10x what we were. They had a view that, we're growing to a great size. We should just not take profits and sort of just grow this into a lifestyle business. And my personality wasn't going to allow for this lifestyle business that they were talking about. So I said, look, buy me out and I'll figure out what my next role was. We came to an amicable sort of conclusion and exit. And within the first month, I got a call from MTN. So the group CEO of MTN, Rob Shooter, yes, and the South African CEO of MTN, Godfrey Motso, called me up and said, listen, would I be interested in a role? At the time, I'm like, I'm not going into corporate. I'd enjoyed the entrepreneurial journey. I wanted to keep doing that. I had no idea what I wanted to do, but it wasn't that. They said, look, come for the interview. Let's have a chat and let's explain what the deal was. And they'd done some acquisitions and they just really couldn't get them off the ground. So I said, all right, cool. This sounds exciting, but they had to leave me alone. I said, guys, I cannot get bogged down by bureaucracy. I need to be left alone so I can build these companies. And they said, fine, let's do it. So I committed for 5 years. And one of the companies was called Smart Village. We rebranded into Supersonic. It was the worst ISP in 2017. It was 18 months later, it was the number 1 ISP in South Africa. So great story, MTN's first ever sub-brand, and really, really enjoyed the time there. But while we were at MTN, myself and some colleagues were looking around. So it kind of hit a plateau. We were doing double-digit growth month on month. The business was doing exceptionally well. And I was trying to figure out, like, what is the next step for this business? Just running this home internet business is kind of, it's got a shelf life, and we need to, add some additional features and revenue to the business. So we looked internationally, and what we noticed was a lot of the big operators like Verizon, Orange, etc., were building digital sub-brands. So, to disrupt the big motherships from a mobile perspective is very hard. It's multiple tech stacks, lots of legacy, etc. Whereas bringing a sub-brand disrupts the mother brand, but still 100% owned, made a hell of a lot of sense. So we put an entire strategy together. We pitched it to the board. And end of 2019, it was approved. So we were going to build what we would call Supersonic Mobile. So it was going to be part of the fixed line. Then we would add the mobile to it, and that was going to be the digital sub-brand. COVID then hit, and all the CapEx projects were pulled, right?
Yes.
So it was all on hold, and we're kind of in a holding pattern. Then 2022 came along, and we repitched it, and the board deferred the project. Now, deferring in corporate speak is, 2 years, 5 years, 20 years, 500 years. Who knows?
Who knows, yeah.
But
it's shelved, basically.
Basically. So I kind of had to take a bit of introspection and said, look, if this is the case, like, what am I going to do? Because I kind of fulfilled my role at MTN. I said I'd given them 5 years. So the thing was, I didn't, and almost not the type to just run a business, that does very marginal growth, etc. I like the fast-paced startup phase of a business. So I thought, listen, we've done the research, understand the industry, understand the business, understand what's required. I'm gonna go and do this alone. So resigned in 2020. They went out and did some funding, and we can touch on the funding journey. That's a whole nother discussion. Did manage to get some funding?
How does the idea come to you, Calvin? Is it do you get the brand name first? Do you know exactly what you want to do? Do you know what it's going to look like? Do you know, like, how does this sort of come together? When does that sort of spark? Is it a moment? Is it just slowly,
I think for me, that's some of the key things, right?
Yeah.
There's got to be a genuine gap in the market. So in this case, right, for mobile operators, 96.5% market share. The rest is MVNOs. 200 billion rand a year, 101 million SIM cards. So massive industry. But is it being done right? If I had to go and look at the basics, it's 30 years old in South Africa, MTN and Vodacom as an example. Nothing's changed in 30 years, right? Yes, we've gone from technology-wise, 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, fine, technology is advanced. But the packages, the way you sign up, you've got contract and prepaid, you've still got scratch cards and USSD. Like, the basics have not changed. The fundamentals haven't changed. So I kind of, being at MTN, I saw the inner workings of that, and I just realized, look, this is messed up, but it's not going to change. So, you could go into steer codes, you could go into excodes, you go into board meetings, and the thinking was still linear. It was, we're going to keep doing the same thing because it's worked for us for 30 years, therefore it's going to work for the next 30 years. So I think, you go back to, the thinking. It's, one, there's got to be industry that is big enough. And listen, it depends on where you want to go, right? So, I mean, I chose a really big industry. Maybe a little bit crazy, but so I wouldn't say always go for the biggest industry, but I happen to have the expertise in that industry.
Yes.
But if there's a genuine need, you can build a business around it, and then you've got to have the passion for it. So for me, entrepreneurship is a mindset, and I think South Africans. I think we've got the most incredible entrepreneurs in South Africa, but I think we need to sort of cultivate a culture of where failure isn't failure, where failure is learnings, where we still got this culture where a failure is a failure. It's not. Absolutely isn't. I actually hate that word failure. I think it holds so many people back, and it's a fear-based thinking, which I just think is crazy. So, if I had to listen to every single person who I told this story to, when I was starting, I mean, I'd be in a loony bin, right? They were just like, you absolutely mad. And you've got to learn to block that out. You've got to back yourself 100%, and then learn to listen to the people that have got your back, right? And don't listen to the naysayers. I think from their perspective, I get it. They wouldn't do what I'm doing. That's fine. But don't discourage me from doing it. And I think that's where you've got to be very careful, because you're kind of going to everyone, what do you think of this idea? What do you think of that idea? Most people will tell you it's a terrible idea because they wouldn't do it. But then you also have to stress test your idea. So that's the hard part for me, was to say, how to ask enough people to make sure that there's an opportunity on the one hand, but then not ask too many people of the wrong type of person that are going to discourage them from even trying.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think if there's a thinking or a methodology, it would be that, right? Is make sure there's an opportunity to disrupt. The opportunity is big enough, and then there's a gap in the market, And I think that probably the last one is that it's not too easy to replicate. Because the last thing you want to do is something that is super easy to replicate. And, someone with a little bit more money and a little bit more expertise comes in and absolutely crashes you out.
That's good advice.
I realized that the industry was so complex that to win was going to be very hard. But once you've done that hard, you're going to be 18 to 24 months ahead of anybody else who started. And I think that was a key critical thing for me when I entered this journey.
You almost have a head start.
You've got a head start.
Like 2 years.
And as long as you keep ahead of it, you'll keep that head start.
How does the name come together? How do you land on Melon?
That was an interesting one. So we started with the typical way, right? You kind of get some creatives and you say, listen, let's look for names.
Yeah.
And we got Blitz Mobile and this mobile and that mobile, and I hated all of them. And the reason being is that I wanted a name that we could give a personality, a persona, a life. Yes. So the second I say Blitz Mobile, you kind of think of a lightning bolt or a fast or a this or that. And I was like, no, I don't like it. Yeah. And literally one night, Friday nights, complaining to my wife that she's, tired of all these names. None of them are working. Like, let's find a name that's going to work. And we were looking at, I said, like, what is the most random thing? And we've gone into fruits, right? Apple, obviously the iStore, Apple, the Mango Airlines.
Yeah.
And she literally said, right, Melon Mobile, the alliteration. I said, I love it. I literally, that same moment, I sent a message in one of the WhatsApp groups to my team, and I said, guys, try Melon Mobile, build a brand around, let's see. And that same brand that they built is the same brand as today.
Crazy.
So
what
it's kind of
story.
I think it's, if it works, it works. And that's the cool thing. And the nice thing about it, Melon is just, it's fresh, it's simple. We've created a personality around it, and we can continue to build this sort of simple, agile personality around a brand versus being sort of stuck in a very complex space.
And so who were the early founders or the early team that you put together? And were you just funding it out your pocket in the beginning just to sort of get the brand, and the technology? How do you get that first sort of, we've got an MVP here, we've got something we can actually work with?
I think that's the hard part. So let's start with yes, I was self-funded, I even sold my house. So, full kudos to my family who've taken it's been a hard journey
Incredible.
For them. Yeah. Part of funding was, selling house shares, etc. But I believed in the business and the opportunity. And then in terms of the people, I think it's one of the key things if you're going to build a business, and especially something from the ground up and in the space that you're building it. So I approached people that I'd worked with before, people that sort of bought into the vision, that had kind of seen what I'd done before. So they knew that, listen, if I put my mind to it, it was going to happen. It just, the when, the what, and the how I weren't sure, but they knew it was going to happen. So I started off with 4 people. And it was just, there were 6 of us actually total. 3 of them were paid. The other 3 were sort of working on the side and just sort of consulting in a bit of sideline conversations. So, that's how we started. In terms of the tech, and you ask, how do you get that MVP? I think that was probably one of the hardest. Funding was probably the hardest. But when I'd left MTN, we'd done the tech sort of investigation, and we kind of had 3 or 4 options. So I thought, listen, this is going to be the easiest part because, the work had been done. Once I actually started approaching these guys, I realized, oh my gosh, this tech's not going to work. It was ultimately legacy tech stacks that they'd either put into the cloud or was selling as cloud native, etc. But they were just 100%. Legacy tech stacks.
Yeah.
And I had a vision for what I wanted, and I still have a vision for the next 5 years. And we've delivered 20% of that. And if I looked at the tech, I was like, well, this is going to run out of runway within the first year. And then I'm going to say, well, how do we do the rest? And then I'm going to be, hamstrung. So that was a lot harder because I actually had to go out and find different companies. We eventually found a company. So they're the world's biggest telco platform provider. Now, I promise you that everyone said, do not go there. They're very expensive, etc. And I was like, well, look, I have to chat to everyone. I spoke to them and they said, look, entry level is sort of $10 million. And I was like, well, that's definitely not going to fly. But they said, we've got this startup division inside the company that potentially, is the perfect fit for us. Had a chat to them, and they had this, I always say it's slideware because that's all it was. It was a PowerPoint presentation of their roadmap, what they were going to build. It wasn't built, not at all. So, I eventually, I called them out on it quite early because I figured that, they were selling me something that wasn't built, and I could see that this was the case.
Yeah.
I then said, all right, cool, I got it, but let's work together on it. So we now know where we stand. We're trying to build this. Your guys' tech stack, your future tech stack matches this.
Yeah.
Let's build it together. So you guys,
your PowerPoint matches this. So.
Exactly. So, they had the tech resources, they had the money, they had all of that. We had the vision and the customer side of what we wanted to build. So it's kind of a match made in heaven.
Okay. So
we took that stack, and we built it together, and we launched at the Mobile World Congress in 2023. That's where Melon was born. That was the first sort of site of it. And that was in Feb 2023. And then we officially launched in South Africa in May 2023. So that was how the tech started. But yeah, and it was an interesting one. It was such a hard decision because, the early days of working with I'm a startup in this massive organization. There were days where I was like, what am I doing? I should have gone with these guys. I should have gone with those guys. What about these? All those sort of doubts. And that's normal. But look, I look back and we made the right decision.
Amazing. Amazing.
We could have gone 50 other ways. But it was the right decision, and they've been great partners. So it's, But
tell me, and the funding side, how did you get into... did you raise other funding outside of that? And
I did.
How did that happen? And
look, that, as I say, the tech side was hard, but I think the funding was even more difficult. I think there's one thing that I could fix in this country would be access to funding and making that a simpler process. There are lots of ways to get money, but in South Africa it's extremely hard.
Yeah.
I met over 70 investors.
Crazy. Wow.
And really. It's I related to going on 70 dates. And every single one you think's the one, right? And then they just ghost you. So I found that very interesting. So we had very few no's. In fact, I think I had 2 no's out of the 70. The other 68 just didn't respond, just didn't get back to you, etc.
Wow.
And what I found out after the fact is a lot of the guys do that because they love the business. They just don't want to be the first guys in. So when someone else put the first cash in, if it works, if they say no, then they kind of sidelined. Whereas if they just don't respond, they've got an opportunity still. Yes. I think it's weird. I don't really understand that thinking, but
I mean, being a telco, the amount must have also been quite big.
Yeah, I was looking for 50 million, right?
Okay.
So
it's not a small amount.
It's not a small amount, and that's the other problem, right? So yes. you're looking for, pretty decent money just off the back of a PowerPoint presentation.
And 70 people, I mean, you must feel like you're running out of people at that point, right?
Oh, no, you have no idea. I mean, there were days I was like, geez, what have I done? And I think that's part of an entrepreneurial journey, and I think that's where you've just got to back yourself. It's I But I remember going on walks in the morning, sort of getting up early and just sort of trying to clear my mind. Saying, geez, but what happened to these guys? What happened to those guys? Why aren't those guys responding? What's happening here? It's part of the process. But, eventually I find a high net worth individual out of Cape Town.
And how far are you here from you need this lifeline or this thing to happen until you actually have to call the help?
Look, I think the way I'd done it to that stage was pretty smart. So I had made too many commitments. Mm-hmm. The one thing about partnering with this tech platform was that I didn't have to pay them any money.
Oh, amazing.
So we were able to build this thing together, and I had to pay them on delivery of the entire platform. Because I was like, listen, you're a startup. Maybe you don't deliver this thing. So that made a massive difference. So that built a lot of runway.
This is with or without your energy. We've got the product. Here it is. It's tangible. You can play with it, see it, experience it. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay. So you meet him. You meet with this high net worth individual.
We kind of went through the basics, and I think we concluded a deal 3 weeks later, and then we could really start running. Then I started to employ some people, really started to build the marketing, the launch, the product set, the etc. So it was,
So talk to me about that. I mean, it's, once you have all the different tools, it's like, now we need to start acquiring customers here, So and what was that, what worked, what didn't work,
I think that's, one of the big lessons there was our launch product and promo was something we called Build Your Own Plan. So
yes, I remember.
Idea, right? Yeah, so, it makes sense. Everyone's you have to buy 500 minutes and 500 or 5 gigs and 500 SMSs at X price. You're like, well, I don't need so many SMSs. I want more data, etc. So we're like, well, let's just, completely flexible, etc. Challenge is that only works if you know how much what you utilize. Now, currently, 99% of South Africa has no idea how many minutes they use, how much data they use, because there's just no visibility, right?
Yes.
So you put this product out there, and everyone goes, well, I don't know. I can afford 200 Rand, or I can afford 300 Rand. So it was an interesting mindset. We're like, well, why is no one signing up for this? What's going on? What's the product? You're like, the journey's perfect. We just didn't understand.
And just putting that much choice, I guess, in a person's hands is like,
when you've gone from no choice to all the choices, it was too far, too extreme. Yeah. So we then started to bring it back. We built some packages, and then we could start to see some traction.
And how did you approach hiring people? Were you very hands-on with that?
Well, I think that's probably one of the most critical and controversial sort of ways that I've done it. Yes. I only hired people that I'd worked with, or someone else had to have worked with someone to join. And the reason for that was very simple, is that we could not afford to fail, and we needed people that were going to have full buy-in to the process. And one of the things I did there was, for instance, you work for me and you say, listen, I've got the perfect person. So, all right, cool, bring them on board. But if they don't work out, you have to fire them. It's fascinating how that cut 90% of the nonsense out, because once you take accountability for that person, you're not going to bring your drunk uncle on board anymore. And, you feel sorry for the guy, you're going to bring him on board, but suddenly you're like, oh, shucks, this guy is not really the best fit for this company. Yeah. It fixed that. So, from a hiring perspective, I think keep it very close when you start. Yes. I mean, right now, we use recruitment agents, etc. And look, even in terms of that, I've got quite a strict policy in terms of psychometrics. So it's a 4-step process. One is 2 psychometric tests. So if you pass those, I want to say pass because you can't fail it. If it fits the culture and what we're trying to build,
brilliant.
Then you go into CV. Then we look at your CV. So one of the things I've always struggled with is CVs necessarily tell the full story, right? I mean, if I try and put a CV together, even for myself, I don't think it's that impressive, right? I think you can't tell the story on paper. So what I wanted was let the psychometrics kind of give me the person's potential. Then I can look at the CV and say, okay, cool, there is a fit. And then the last step is just the interview. So basically, by the time you walk into the interview, you've 75% already ticked the boxes. And it's just really, are you going to screw up the interview, or are you just a really bad person or something? So That's kind of the process we followed there.
Brilliant. I love that. And I don't think it's controversial at all. That's your advantage, right? These are some of the people you've worked with that you've sort of proof tested and that you've been to war with, basically. And that early on, you can't mess this up. You're in it now. There's other people's money involved. There's like so many people that you're responsible for. And it's like, there's no room for error.
And I think, testimony to that is we have not had one person leave the company since they've started.
Incredible.
So it's been crucial. It's painful, but it's important. Just bringing the first person, that comes along on board just doesn't make any sense.
100%. Tell me, where's the company today? How many staff? Like how many?
We 60 staff.
60 staff.
Based between Cape Town and Joburg. Call center is sitting on about 30 staff. Yes. And then the rest are, it's marketing, it's sales, it's creative, tech, etc. We were obviously born out of COVID days. I want to say that's we're a COVID startup. So we've got offices for the call center, but the rest of the staff are remote. It's an interesting point where we are, at the sort of 60 mark, it's probably 50 is the real mark, is we're finding that in person is more important. And we lack that real collaboration, that real sort of interactiveness that we're starting to see it falling apart. So we're going to have to,
especially in the tech business, I feel like it's so crucial,
It's so
that
crucial.
Energy of that startup culture is like so crucial,
I mean, that corridor conversation, that the rapport that you build just doesn't exist.
Definitely.
And, every time you want to do something, you have to set up a meeting. So there's nothing informal anymore, which I think is problematic.
Yes.
You really want to be able to have an informal conversation over, the water cooler, etc.
Yes.
What's happening with these guys? What's happening with tech? What do you think of the marketing? You can have those conversations. Whereas now, none of those conversations happens. It's a very structured meeting. Get this done. Do that, etc. Bye.
Yeah.
So we're relooking at that. So I think probably early next year we'll formalize that, get the guys into the office, and
a hybrid of that. Or
exactly. I think we'll always be hybrid, but
it's
we definitely want at least 50% of the time in the office.
Yeah, it's something you see in a lot of startups. So that makes complete sense. Tell me, is it public knowledge? Like, what's the user base? Like, how many people?
About 100,000 customers.
Incredible.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
So it's been a journey. I think customer acquisition it's extremely hard in a market that's 100. But look, we got 170% saturation.
Yes.
So there's no new people really that are looking for SIMs. It's kind of the conversion is 99% of your base. So how do we convert you from the red, yellow, blue, and orange guys across to us? And that's been a really interesting exercise. It's trial and error. I can tell you that's where the failure thing is such a misnomer. You've just got to keep trying until you actually figure out what is that hook. What's going to make you actually change? What is the pain point? What is the limit? What is the those kind of things? And I think we've got a really good grasp on that.
I love that.
And if you look at our growth, right? I mean, it's been like that. It took a long time to get those initial customers. I was talking to my chief commercial officer earlier, and what took us 12 months to do, we do in a month now. So that's the kind of
amazing
growth. So it's great.
A few more questions, Calvin, before we wrap up.
No,
what if you had to put it in a couple sentences? Like, why should people join Melon?
I think for me, it's not one thing. Okay, I think a lot of people kind of say, well, what is the one thing or the main reason to join? I don't think there's one, all right? It's the quality of service and the network is exactly the same as the big guys, so that's not a reason. I think the key reasons are simplicity. Our propositions are amazing. So if you're looking at price, etc., I'm not saying we're the cheapest. We are certainly cheaper, but we're not the cheapest, and I don't want to be the cheapest. I feel that we have to make a decent margin because we've got a decent margin, give you better customer service, reinvest, etc. So I think those are crucial things. Customization and month to month. It's the days of doing contracts. I think just doesn't make sense to me anymore. Why lock you in? I have this strong belief that if we provide you with amazing customer service, amazing product at the right price, you're not going to churn. And we've proven that hypothesis. Our churn is extremely, extremely low. over 60% of our customers are ported in.
Wow.
So using us as their primary provider. And that's phenomenal. It was always a goal of ours, but certainly not the most important one. But for us, we've proven that that's actually possible. And then it's just, right now, and why is getting SIM card such a hard thing? Right now on our network, you could sit here and 6 minutes later, you could be up and running.
Brilliant.
In the comfort of where we are now, without having to go to a store, etc. So those are the kind of things for me that are a game changer.
You can scan your ID, right? You can do your
scan your ID, there. Scan your everything. I mean, it's we did a demo to a potential MVNO yesterday, and we did it online, right? We did the entire sign up journey, activated a SIM card in 5 minutes.
Brilliant.
So if you take those 5 things as a reason to switch, it's simplicity, it's price and proposition, it's all managed off the back of an app and web, so no need to go to stores, month to month. And then just overall, just a much easier company to deal with. It's like if you go into Halopita, we've got a 5 out of 5 Halopita rate. I mean, it doesn't exist.
I feel like it's more insane for a telco to do that. Like that's just absurd.
I mean, we had a meeting with PwC 2 weeks ago, and they were presenting the telco stats.
Yeah.
And one of the things is net sentiment. Telcos, so the big 4, are sitting at -40 net sentiment. We're at +70. So we're 110 points.
Crazy.
Or 100 points, difference between, so the traditional telcos themselves. So we're doing something right.
Yes.
Part of that study and report was quite interesting. Share of voice, we're sitting at 0.5%. So we're tiny in terms of like share of voice, but net sentiment, the people who do join us love us.
Amazing.
And I think that's an important thing. And I think that's going to be the winning formula for us going forward. We're trying to build a community of people that, 1, trust us, 2, love us, and that we consistently deliver on promises that we make and we keep them. And we've done that to date. So,
brilliant.
Yeah.
Tell me, where do you see the future of telco as a genre, I want to call it? What do you see sort of the future of telco in general?
So I see it more ubiquitous, right? Because right now you've got like kind of your ISP and your fiber there.
Yes.
You've got your mobile provider here. You've got your Netflix or OTT provider here. And then you've got your fintech here. It's trying to bring all of that stuff together. So, how do I get... Let's take Melon as an example. I want to get three iPhones from Melon. I want to get 3 packages for my wife and my kid, example, or kids. And I need a fiber line at home and a fiber line at the business. Through a single provider, through a single interface, that's what you're looking for.
Genius. So
that's how I see it going forward. And I think, if you take market share today, MVNOs own 3.5%. The telcos own 96.5%. If you look internationally, a healthy mix is around 80-20.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a big market share that we can still take. And I think that's our focus is, how do we capture more and more of that market share, but just doing it differently, right? And I think one of the key things here, I'm not trying to copy what the other guys are doing. The number of guys say, but have you seen these guys that launched that? Have you seen I said, good for them. I'm not worried about them. We've got a very specific vision. And those are the guys I want to focus on. And those are the people I want to take on our journey. I think if you constantly looking around and watching what everyone everyone is doing, I think you'll end up kind of like headless chicken, right? One day you're doing this, one day you're following someone else's strategy. I think you got to stick to your strategy. Obviously pivot if necessary. I mean, I'm not saying be stubborn about your strategy, but at least have a strategy. And if it makes sense, try and stick to it as far as possible. But I think, having a single ecosystem that is just simpler and easier to manage, I think that's the way forward in terms of telco.
100%. And is there a world in which, I'm sure regulation plays quite a big sort of red tape or a guideline of sorts, is there a world where data becomes a lot cheaper in South Africa? Is that something that's, because like when you travel overseas, it's something you obviously pick up. You go like, how are these guys getting it right?
Yeah, look, South Africa is not as expensive as everyone makes it out to be, but the answer is yes. The prices are definitely coming down.
Yes, definitely have. Yes, I would say, especially in the last couple of years.
They have. If you take the US as an example, US is significantly more expensive than South Africa. I travel a lot to Europe. we're pretty we're within limits.
Okay.
Now, South Africa has some complexities. We're a big country in terms of geography, and we've got 98% coverage, right? So you think of the most, the furthest area where it's got 6 people who live under this tower. That tower costs the same as one in Cape Town, right? So the fact is we've got massive coverage and not and low density. So
you
that
don't
makes
think about these things.
Yeah,
it's so good to have this chat with you. Yeah.
So that creates, that's one of the reasons that it's a little bit more expensive, is that, you can say, look, we'll bring the prices down. And, if you're in Cape Town, it's Cape Town, Durban, Joburg, as an example, the price will be a 10th. We could do that. But then the poor guys who live in the rural areas, they just get absolutely annihilated. And you don't ever want that. I mean, it's just because you live in a rural area, it shouldn't mean you get punished. So those are the kind of things that you need to take into consideration when pricing is considered. But that being said, the price of 5G, as an example, of delivering 5G is significantly cheaper than delivering 3G, etc.
Yes.
And a lot of the networks are actually decommissioning a lot of their 3G towers and putting in 5G towers, etc.
Really?
Which will then lower the cost of production, which then lowers the price to the consumer.
Okay, that's interesting.
And then I think if you look even longer term, you'll get to a stage where the mobile networks become infrastructure providers. The MVNOs like ourselves, we become the consumer and front facing, which brings down the total cost to serve.
Yes.
And that's another way to bring it down.
Okay.
Right now, the mobile networks have to do everything, right? They build the networks, they put the fiber down, they've got the stores, they do everything. But that cost to serve is significantly higher than our cost to serve, as an example. So if we can bring down the cost to serve across the entire ecosystem, then we're winning. So the short answer is yes, it will come down, but it's not as simple as just dropping prices, etc.
I love that. Just from your perspective as CEO, as a founder, what are some characteristics you think early founders should sort of embody and focus on? And when you look back on your journey, what are some of the sort of key characteristics that someone needs to sort of hone and focus in on?
First one would be mindset. You've got to have the mindset of, this is what I was saying earlier, don't listen to too many people. Back yourself, have the mindset that this thing will win. I read quite a lot of books. One of the key things they say is certainty. So have absolute certainty in what you're doing and the process that you're following. And I think, when you wake up with a little bit of doubt and you say, geez, what am I doing? You say, this will work. It gives a little bit of additional motivation and focus to actually get things done. So that would be one for sure. 2 is, it's going to be hard. And like I said to her, if you're building a new business or being an entrepreneur for the money, you're probably going to end up failing, because the money is a net result of what you do. It's not the reason to do it, because the journey is so hard. For instance, I haven't had a salary in 3 years. Okay, so if it was for the money, I would have bailed a long time ago. But I can see the bigger picture, and therefore, that's the motivation. So I think you've got to make sure you're doing it for the right reason. And my reason was always, I wanted to just disrupt the space. And I knew if I did it well, money would be a net result of me doing that. So I think that's just decouple those two things. If you're going to do something an entrepreneur because I'm going to be a multi-billionaire, you might be, but the journey to get there is incredibly painful. So make sure that you're prepared for that. And then make sure you surround yourself with the right people. People who are just going to, when you're having that bad day, say, like my team, my core of 7 team plus my family, they've supported me all along the way. And I think that's critical, because, you're having a bad day, your team are going, hey, we're on the right road here. Geez, you're not seeing you're seeing the wood for the trees yet. What's going on? And sometimes you just need that little reset. So yeah, those are the key things that I would say.
I love that. That's really, really powerful. Is there ever an idea to potentially take the company public? Is there ever an idea to, is it bringing more investment on? Like, what is the future when you look at the next sort of 5-10 years of this business?
I think it's a bit of both.
Yeah.
I think the next 18 months for us are critical. We've got to get, in a market where there's 101 million SIM cards, 100,000 might seem like a lot, but it's not enough. We're still very small and niched ultimately in terms of the bigger picture.
Yes.
So we really need to scale that. I think there's an opportunity for listing, etc. But I think, in terms of where our vision is, it's to take what we've built in South Africa and take it internationally.
Okay, brilliant.
I think you start to realize that, what you build in South Africa and, how we build things here is just so different to way things are built internationally. So we've actually got US licenses already.
Incredible.
So that's quite exciting. And the US market, as much as to give you an idea, it's 40 times the size of the South African market in terms of telco. So it's absolutely massive. Sure, the competition is also huge, so I'm not discounting that. But you've got 50 countries in a country. And if you can start to understand that, you kind of break it down and say, listen, I don't need to tackle the whole of the US. I can tackle 1 or 2 states to start with. And that's big enough to actually build a substantial business. And from there, you kind of scale it. So
brilliant.
I think if you had to ask the question, it's for us, it's get this business to nice, strong, profitable business that can then fund international opportunities.
Incredible. Yeah. I back you to do it, man. You've definitely disrupted the industry, and the interface and just the way you guys have approached it is so fantastic. I actually can't even think of a network I've come across that looks and feels better even globally. So I mean kudos to you guys. You've built like a world-class product.
Yeah, thanks.
From my side, last 2 questions, Calvin. I'd like to know if someone is listening to this podcast and they have somewhat similar aspirations to yours. I don't think everyone's going to wake up and go open a telco tomorrow, but if they have similar, if they've really been inspired from this conversation, and you are giving advice to someone who is stepping into this industry, or similarly you're speaking to the 25-year-old version of yourself, what's a couple of words you would leave them with?
I think don't let fear hold you back from doing these things. I think the biggest regret you'll have is not doing it, kind of seeing someone else with your idea, 10 years from now. I think the younger you are, take more risks, do more crazy things, and learn as much as you can. When the older you get, the more difficult it becomes. I've got a family, I've got kids, all these kind of things makes it a lot more complex. But thankfully, I'd made a lot of the mistakes when I was younger. When I was 24, 25, I started the B2C ISP. And let me tell you, I made a hell of a lot of mistakes, but I'd made them early on in my life so that by the time I got to this, there was a maturity in my thinking and my approach to a startup / entrepreneurship. So I would say, don't take the easy way out. The easy way out is, go and study, get a job, climb the corporate ladder and hope for retire. Now, that is for some people, for sure. But I think if your mindset is different and you have aspirations for, I want to say change the world. I've always had that mentality. I want to change the world.
Absolutely.
And the only way you're going to change the world, in my view, is to have money. And once you've got money, you can start to change the world. I didn't believe that when I started, I got to be honest. I always thought that, money was the root of all evil. These kind of things you taught when you're young. It's completely the opposite. My mindset's completely shifted. It's money is the power that you require. Then you can change the world.
It's the tool. Yeah.
It's the tool, right? And I think that would be a mindset shift that I would have told myself 25 years ago. Is that go after the money, focus on it, because that's how you change the world, and you can really make a difference in other people's lives. Like I was saying, funding. I mean. One day when we make substantial money, it's something that I'd like to focus on, is how to build an incubation hub in South Africa that really empowers people to go out there and build. I think, right from your township startups to, your big tech and fintech and other type of industry startups, is how to build that out better and more scalably, because I think access to funding in this country is just so hard,
so difficult. I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
So that would be one of the things. So I think it's make the mistakes, fail, and don't be scared. Like people will drag you down because of their fear. Don't let their fear dictate your future and your path.
I love that. You mentioned you read quite a bit. Is there a certain book you've gifted more than any other book to people?
It's a book by the founder of Waze. It's called Focus on the Problem, Not the Solution. And if you take the basis of that, right, it's like in my case, the problem was telco hasn't been disrupted. I needed something. the solution in my head was, build your own plan. It's this, it's that, whatever else. Be careful of that in any startup, So I've read that book 3 or 4 times, because every time I get stuck and I'm like, geez, but why is it not working? I kind of go and watch the Waze story and the process. I mean, he's done 2 unicorn exits. So for me, that would certainly be a book. And then look, I do a lot of autobiographies, Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, etc. So yeah.
I'm also crazy about autobiographies.
No,
brilliant, man.
You learn so much in those things. I mean, those guys have done the hard work, and you start to, and there are lots of nuggets in there, and just a lot of it is mindset. But yeah,
absolutely. Calvin, my last question to you is, how would you like to be remembered?
As making a significant change, and not in the telco industry. Yeah, sure, that's the industry I'm in. But like I was saying earlier, that's just a means and a mechanism. I want to leave a legacy behind of someone who actually made a difference. And in South Africa specific, I love this country. I think we've got every single ingredient to be the best country in the world.
Agreed.
But we've got some challenges, right? And my mindset is not to say, well, it's government's responsibility, they must fix it, and they're useless or whatever else. You can have that mindset, but it's going to get us nowhere. I want to find solutions, I don't have the solutions, but that's what I'd like to do, is that, made a meaningful difference and try to bring things together to better this country. Then I've achieved my goal.
Brilliant. From my side, just to give you your flowers, you guys are doing such incredible work, man, and such an honor to sit here with you and to just pick your brain, and you give us so much context and so much more to think about, and you're tackling such a massive industry, and it's incredible that you guys are now making an actual dent, and it's becoming a thing, and it's part of our culture now. And there's a new network provider. It was, for the longest of time, there was everyone who tried would fall away. It feels like you guys are here to stay for a long time. So appreciate you making time. And
absolutely. And I think just one thing, this is just the start. If you take what we call our Melon 2.0, we're launching that in Feb. Some really exciting things to come there. So, we're 2 years ahead of everyone. We're going to stay out 2 years ahead of it.
Amazing.
So, yeah.
Brilliant.
Showing you that.
Thank you so much, Calvin. I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Ciao, man.
Thank you for making time. That was incredible. People are really going to resonate with that, man. That was brilliant.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me.